anything in your life that was either too much, too fast, or too soon for your nervous system to handle. Anything that your body, heart, and mind didn't have the capacity to handle. And that's very much what nervous system work is about, expanding our capacity.
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. I am particularly excited for the conversation today. This is the person I've probably known, the person I've personally known the longest of any of our guests. But before we get into all that story, Rachel, welcome.
Hello, friends. Hello, Andrew. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for our conversation. And before we get into that full story and everything you've been doing, how would you describe yourself?
I love this question because it sounds like, who am I? Which was really kind of what got me here today, exploring that deeply. I would describe myself as a soul having a human experience right now. I am an explorer. I am insatiably curious. And what lights me up is kind of navigating, dancing, and working in the spaces that intersect. I'm fascinated with digging into the underneath of things and what's often invisible, yet the powerful things that connect us all. So I love exploring the spaces of where science and sacred meet. And that's kind of my approach to somatic work.
Yes. And speaking of somatic work, I mean, that's a little bit of the story, I think, between us as well. So for anyone listening that does not know, Rachel and I went to high school together.
Yeah, way back.
Yeah, way back. Won't say what year we graduated, but you could easily find that out. And then we kind of went our separate ways. And then in our careers, found ourselves in the same industry again, ran into each other at conferences in the vacation rental industry, where I think we both work. I was there for more than 10 years. I think you were as well. And then both have now come into this health, mindset, wellness space and really tightly connected at a time I was getting requests and questions around somatic therapy. And I think it was on a Facebook post I had, you commented and said, hey, here's some work I'm doing. And it was in the somatic space. I was like, oh my God, I'm hearing a ton about this. Let's connect. And so I have been the beneficiary of actually got a firsthand experience some of your work. And it was amazing. And I'm just happy to be able to bring you on the show and share what you're doing with others to expand that.
Love it. Yeah, it was how we began, and back in our Jacksonville days, and the journey of how we intersected, like you said, and to where we are now is a great example of kind of the journey that we all go on in life, I think. And it's special to be here. It was really special to get to share that experience with you. And I'm just pumped to be able to bring this to the world.
Speaking of that journey, I mean, you had a personal journey yourself that took you into kind of giving this as a gift to others, which is where you are now. And so could you talk a little bit about what pulled you into this work in the first place?
Yes. It was very much inspired by my own journey, my own struggles. I do believe in that saying that we end up teaching what we most needed to learn. And that we do need to struggle to learn oftentimes, like part of the human experience, I don't know that I've ever really learned something that came easy. Let's put it that way. So yeah, different phases of my life kind of brought me here, but some ones that stand out, and what I like to explore with clients. I'm just going to set this as some context because I'm kind of a Lord of the Rings nerd. And I love to reference it because it's such a timeless message that applies to so much of life in this work. And I often do it in breathwork sessions and groups, but particularly in one-on-one coaching containers. And here's why it's relevant, right? Like we're all kind of Frodo in life. And we start out in the Shire sometimes, whatever that is for us, our family, our environment, we get used to our comfort zones, right? And then something happens where we're challenged and we have a choice to like get out of the Shire and go do the scary thing or stay in our comfort zone. And to me, it's kind of like the hero's journey, which is what the story is about. And what I find myself and what I went through and going through myself is that journey of like figuring out, what's underneath my patterns. For me, in the beginning, I struggled with chronic anxiety, with addiction, for years. I lived in that fear place of not wanting to like get out of the Shire, but what I do with clients is kind of offer them that guidance. I think we all need that assistance with love. So it's part Gandalf with the guidance and support, part Samwise, like I'm your buddy through this. I've got your back no matter what happens.
Ride or die.
Ride or die, right? Like even when it gets really yucky, which it will, because like life will be painful. But with the right support and safety, we can get through that together and get to the other side. And then I'm also like a little sprinkle of Rizzo, which is like tough and tender. I'm going to keep it real, but with like a fierce love. And an important piece I want to mention because, you're asking about my journey. I believe we all have these people that come into our lives. We may not realize it at the time, but particularly in our formative years, and someone who I view now, I'm going to cry on this one, someone who I view now as one of those angels in my life that totally changed the trajectory was Elise Bush, my volleyball coach in high school. And, at that time in my path, I was totally lost. I had a lot of struggles happening in the home life. Parents were getting divorced and was at a brand new school in high school. We're going way back now, but it all relates. And got plopped onto the volleyball team, totally like a fish out of water at the time, didn't really know anybody. But she was one of those people that stepped in and she saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself at the time. And I didn't make it easy for her. I was kind of a punk at the time, like pushing the boundaries and the things. And she stuck with me. She was my Gandalf, man. She was my Samwise. And she believed in me. And that's essentially what I do now for people. Like she was one of those people that believed in me when I needed it the most. And set up the confidence for me to have opportunities that I never would have had, for my future. And even though she was taken from us too early, like her approach, her spirit will always live on in me. Many other people's lives she touched too, but that's the kind of energy that I want to recognize, that I want to emulate, and that I try to bring to clients. And so that was a big shift in my own journey. And then just navigating, feeling kind of alone during my formative years, but also, looking for connection. A lot of those years, even though I found that connection through sports, building that confidence at the same time, that's when, alcohol and drugs entered the picture. And that was a really big challenge for me. And part of what I still, focus on with coaching, because it's so common. viewing addiction in a totally different way than we've been conditioned to view it, learning to ask not why the addiction, but why the pain underneath it. And so somatic work has helped me really heal a lot of that stuff from my past. And I think so many of us can relate, right? It's like, whatever it is, fill in the blank, whether it's a substance or a behavior, it's really solving a need, an unmet need you have at the time. And for me, at that time, it was connection, this illusion of connection and confidence. And so like years went by. And on the outside, I was fine, right? I was even thriving, some would say. I got good at like pretending, not consciously, but that's kind of what our conditioning teaches us to do. I became like a tough girl in a way, doing the things. But I was completely disconnected from my emotional body. And a quick story, years went by, decades, in my mid 30s, right? I was burned out. I'd kind of been chasing the achievements and all the things, but I had this sense of like loneliness and void inside of me, right? The external validation wasn't doing it anymore. And so something inside me pushed me to go to this intense yoga teacher training. I'd been doing yoga for a while, but it was more like physical. And I get there and the teachers are saying, trust the process. And at that time, Andrew, I'm literally like rolling my eyes in the back, like, whatever, this is so what yoga teachers say. But thank God, I committed and I stuck with it. And that was the key thing that I help people do, like, no matter honor where you're at. And sure enough, about 2 weeks into this experience, my guard started coming down. And we're in a breathwork experience. It's like probably 20 minutes into the breathing. I'm there with 30 people who now, 2 weeks of intense training, I feel pretty bonded with. That was new for me, right? Yeah. And so we're breathing and it hit me. It was my first real somatic experience of getting out of my head and reconnecting to my heart. And I mean, it's emotional for me to even still talk about this, but so important because that's what somatic work is all about, reconnecting to our hearts. And if you would have asked me at the time, like, I would have told you, of course, I'm connected to my body. I would answer from my head. That's all I knew, right? That's where most of us are stuck. That's what we're taught. But this experience of connecting to my body, 20 minutes in, I burst into tears. And the crazy thing was that I didn't stop and judge myself, which is what I would have done in other situations, right? Okay. The magic of what happened was that I just let the tears flow. It was like shedding weight of decades of sadness, of fear, of feeling alone. It was like all the stuff that I had pushed down came rushing out. And I realized a few things. Like, number one, these people aren't judging me. We're all here supporting each other, actually. I'm supporting them. They're supporting me. And the key takeaway that it took me even a couple years to realize this after this happened, which is the foundation of all this work, is this takeaway, this learning that, oh my God, the reason I could have even had that experience was because my body and my nervous system felt safe enough to have it in that container with people I trusted in a space I trusted. And that, like, it still blows my mind. And that is essentially what I aim to help create for clients. It's about the safety that our nervous systems require. It's not words. It's not people saying, you're safe now. It's feeling that genuine, authentic safety. That's the key.
And I mean, I imagine an incredibly large subconscious component to it. Because I remember, it was 15, 20 years ago, reading a study about the quality of sleep people get when they're not in their own bed. Way more disturbances, way more restless, not as much deep sleep, not as long. And the theory kind of on evolutionary biology is, of course not, right? Like, you know what safe is, what home is when you're out in the wild. And when you're in a novel environment, even though you're asleep, your body senses it and says, hey, I need to be more on alert. I don't know. Are there predators here? Are there hunters? Like, I need to be ready. And so people would say, oh, don't worry, you're safe. This is a safe space, right? You're in a company and say, oh, this is a safe space. I have an open door. You can come in. But if you're not truly feeling it, that guard can't come down because you have these subconscious walls that whole time.
That's so true, right? And our minds will try and justify all kinds of things. You're safe, you're fine, whatever. But it's like, it's back to this knowing, this language, this ancient language. Our bodies know before our minds do. But in order we got to listen, we got to pay attention. But yeah, that's exactly right. It's like our gut. No.
It's not a chicken or egg question, right? Like, because the gut, the highly developed Homo sapien brain was way after the body of an animal, right? So the body, the lizard brain part, that is all tied in a totally different way than our conscious intellectualizing of things. So I just realized I brought up somatic. You talked about somatic, but maybe not everybody listening understands what that is. Could you give a little overview? Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, let's do some context here. Where I like to start off with folks, it's, soma means body, basically, old school Greek word. And somatic, I consider like this umbrella term in modern times that includes body-based modalities like yoga, breath work, meditation. But it can also mean like the approach you bring to doing other things like walking in nature or dancing. And the point of all of it is to practice going inward on whatever it is, right? Like yoga is about, there's the physical aspect, but it's really about joining the mind and the body. And so somatic work is about bringing your intention and attention to your internal experience and what we can learn from that, right? It's about reconnecting to this wisdom, our body's intelligence that's, like you said, it's so ancient. But living in these modern times, it's really hard because we've never lived with so much noise and distraction. It's kind of a battle in modern day life, but that's also why I believe these practices are not only just important for all of us right now, but like vital.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, and it was good timing. It was doing this show. Honestly, I was interviewing yoga instructors and dancers and massage therapists and acupuncturists and would ask these questions. And I say, oh, well, I listen to my body. And I kept hearing this over and over. And I realized I did not have that signal, right? Like I had deliberately turned it off. I was a open water swimmer, a distance swimmer. And so trained myself, no, don't listen to signals from your body because it's going to tell you to stop and you don't want to stop because you're not going to win the race. And so I had gotten so far away, and I guess you can get away with it for a while, but I was in pain a lot of the time because I'd go to the gym and it wasn't the right day to do certain things. I'm like, no, the schedule says I do this. So I do this thing. And so for me, that was a conscious unknown when I was coming to you and saying, hey, I don't know how to listen to my body. Like this is a thing that I really need help with. But I knew that was an area of work. You brought up another part that I'm curious about, and maybe others will be as well, on our patterns. Like what is it underneath that puts us into pattern, that creates the triggers that we have? And I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I would think most people don't start off aware of their patterns or triggers. Like they just go through the day. They don't realize this is actually tied to something from 17 years ago that I get triggered on. And when that happens and I check out, right? Like I become emotionally unavailable, or I lash out, or whatever it is. They don't see it. And I mean, this is a language and learning I'm just stepping into now. So I guess I'm curious on that side of things. How do you advise and coach and help people start to see some of those things? Because for me, that's been later in coming and more difficult.
Right. Firstly, you are not alone, not by a long shot.
Okay.
I think this is one of the most human experiences we can have. And I think it's really important and cool that you're at where you're at and you're starting to ask these questions, right? I mean, they're not comfortable questions to ask usually, right? There's a reason, going back to that survival brain, why our brains want to keep us in our comfort zones. It's not comfortable to really look in the mirror at our patterns, right? So that's why this work is hard. I say all the time, it's not for the faint of heart. I think we all need to do it. But yeah, the patterns, what I find to be helpful in terms of like bringing awareness initially is recognizing that we're all conditioned to kind of come from this mental place. And so introducing information in an accessible way on how our brains work, like the neuroscience of it, is really helpful for people. You know, there's so much confusion and like shame, things like that get embedded into these beliefs that start often when we're young, that we do tend to go on autopilot throughout our lives. And it's not because there's something wrong with us, right? I held on to that belief for a long time. I thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't realize that my anxiety was a pattern that started as a way to protect me.
It was a tool for a specific period of time. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So it's learning how to kind of view it differently. It's shifting perspective. But I feel like a helpful way to do that initially for people is to understand how the brain works in these ways. Like patterns start as protectors, either to protect you from pain, right? They fulfill a need in some way. That's where, addictions come from. And so in a way, they're not personal. They are personal, but it's like your brain doesn't care per se. Your brain's just doing its survival thing to keep you protected from feeling pain in some way. And that's why, one of the big reasons why trauma informed is part of what I do. Like I've come to believe that trauma is kind of the root of it all. We all have it in some way, even if we don't know we do, because it's generational. We may be carrying something our grandparents or their parents. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can you say more on that? Because I think there are a lot of people, like you see trauma with a capital T in the world and say, look, I've never dealt with it. Like I haven't dealt with that. I don't have that. And so whether it's seeing yourself as separate, different, or it feels disingenuous or selfish to even put myself in the trauma category, because there are people that have had real trauma, right? Like we always undermine whatever we've gone through. Like, well, it's not as bad as all this. And so what do you say to clients and people in that respect? Because you're saying, hey, we all have it. But a lot of people say, well, no. Like I really don't.
Totally. And that's a natural reaction. That's a common one I hear. Or like, my childhood was great, and I'm like, and the point of this is to say, not that you didn't have a great childhood, like it's to invite this wider understanding, which all the research and everything's pointing to now, a wider understanding of what we thought it was even 10 years ago. Right. And I think we can all agree, even a short time ago, you hear the word trauma and it's like, oh, that's a car accident, physical assault, natural disasters, like all that obvious big T stuff. So the new definition, what I understand it to be, is recognizing those things do often cause trauma. And there's a lot more nuance on a spectrum that we know now. And what this quote by one of my greatest teachers the last decade on trauma sums it up, Dr. Gabor Mate, and he defines it as the trauma wasn't the event. It's the wound you sustained from the event. And the second part of this, like in terms of shifting perspective and starting out on understanding all this in a different way, because right now, I mean, trauma is the hot word, right? Everything's like trauma, 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 trauma. And so I like to kind of, let's zoom out. The key in understanding it to me is viewing it like anything in your life that happened that was either too much, too fast, or too soon for your nervous system to handle. And when you think about it that way, it's like, let's take out the judgment, right? Let's take out the comparison. Nothing's better or worse. It's just like anything that your body, heart, and mind didn't have the capacity to handle. And that's very much what nervous system work is about, expanding our capacity.
Most corporate wellness programs overwhelm employees with too much, or they offer too little to be useful. A Lively gets it right. We start with each employee's data and goals, then serve one clear, personalized action at a time. No noise, just real behavioral change. The outcome? A healthier, happier workforce and measurable impact for your business. Visit alively.com to see personalized wellness in action.
I wonder if the word trauma gets in the way. It's like the messenger gets in the way of the message at some level. So, how Huberman relabeled Yoga Nidra to NSDR to get broader adoption, or people are like, oh, that woo-woo Yoga Nidra, but NSDR, okay, that helps me do this. And I wonder if it's similar with it's trauma. People have a preconceived association of, hey, that's what that is.
Right.
But understanding, hey, you've been in a situation, it may have been a great childhood, but you were the oldest child, or you were the middle child, or the younger child, and you had tools that helped you fit into whatever that environment was. And that may have been really helpful for navigating that. But now you're in a totally different environment, and those may be getting in your way. And you may shy away from calling it trauma because you have these beautiful memories.
Yes.
And so whatever the other phraseology would be, helping you see these tools that I put in, because I really like the way, if you could say it again, it was like too much, too soon, or too fast.
Too fast.
Yeah. For your nervous system
it's like especially when we're little, right? We have limited capacity. And the way he describes it, this is kind of combining two approaches, but anything that's too much, too fast, or too soon. And if we adopt that view, it kind of opens up the lens, right? Because you're right. The definition we've had for so long and been conditioned for years and years and years, people just assume that word means this, but we're expanding the view. And the other piece is like, what's been found is that two people can have the same experience that's on the outside traumatic, even big T traumatic, like a bad car wreck, right? Or whatever it is. But what actually determines whether it registers as traumatic is not that. It's whether they felt supported and seen in the recovery process. That's the differentiator, right? That's what we're starting to understand. So life's going to keep throwing curveballs in all the ways it will. But the thing that matters, we're realizing now, is being supported, not feeling alone. And oftentimes when I work with folks with trauma, it's that feeling of being alone that goes way back, usually. That's in and of itself the trauma. Not feeling safe to talk about something, anything. It doesn't have to be anything big. The little T trauma we know now often starts with those seemingly normal, sometimes, patterns that families have, right? Of avoiding hard conversations, for example, of kind of, praising the wins and achievements, but not really knowing how to be there for their kids emotionally, right? And so it's this kind of dance of not parent blaming, because parents are doing what they know how to do with what they got. And usually it's a hell of a lot less than what they're able to give the next generation, especially when we're talking emotions, right? It's like we're only recently, very recently, kind of allowed to have emotions. People have been in survival mode a long time, right? So we have to recognize that, but also have compassion for the older generations and for ourselves, of just like, okay, we're taken the judgment out of it, and can we hold the space to really get in touch with our feelings and that pain, whatever is still there. Because when we do, that pain, once it's seen and felt and supported, that's when we can transmute it in our bodies. That's when it releases, which is what emotional pain has to do. That's its natural cycle. The problem is that we're also used to pushing it down, to numbing it, right?
And I guess on that, I mean, it may be helpful, and I don't know how deep we can get on it right now, but for people listening, what does that work and that process look like? So we kind of talked about how you get the need and the benefits of doing it, but then how do you actually do it? If you can't do a 2-week intensive yoga instruction training.
It varies. I like to really honor where people are at, right? Because we're all different places. But I think there's some really powerful things. And I like to combine, either sessions virtually or in person with people with the very necessary work of doing things on your own, but I believe healing really happens in relationship. And so at the beginning, that support is needed, especially when, we're talking trauma. But in terms of practical steps, I think the very simple exercises, that 3 of which I included in the workshop that we'll link here, those are great places to start. And they're powerful, proven, right? Plenty of science to prove the benefits now. They're accessible.
I do want to pause there, because we do live in an interesting time where pre-science, there was all this stuff and people use it and adapt it over millennia. Mm-hmm. And then science comes in and you're like, well, we don't understand. So it's not real. It's all woo-woo. Mm-hmm. But then now we're at this really interesting time where the science is able to prove why the quote woo-woo is working, because it is scientific. Right. It's just we didn't come at it from science. It was probably trial and error over centuries, millennia as humans.
Right. And I agree. It's a fascinating time to be alive. Like, science is now proving what the ancient yogis knew and were doing 8,000 years ago. And the beauty of it is that it's so accessible. And a lot of times it's so simple, right? I think that even catches a lot of people. Like, wait a second, changing my life can't be this simple, right? Because we've been so conditioned, to think everything's so complicated, right? I mean, I reference culture a lot in my work because it's such a key piece of how we relate to not only ourselves, but each other, and just the times we're living in. I mean, they're kind of crazy. They're cool in ways, but, it's breaking things down into accessible steps is an important part of what I do. And so it's reconnecting to our internal medicine. And it's through very simple practices like breathing, getting familiar with your sensations, your emotions. The challenge is our body's always speaking to us, but it's noisy, it's distracting. So the challenge is learning to take the time necessary, be patient. That's hard for a lot of people, right? It was hard for me to slow down and pay attention and repeat that enough to where you can start to listen to what's always been there, but just has been drowned out, right? And that's, the key factors, the key pieces of our body's innate language are awareness, sensation and emotion, and just this ability to be with ourselves, right? And then recognizing that energy that's always flowing through us needs to do what energy needs to do, which, as Einstein said, it never dies, it just changes form, right? And so our emotions, we need to start viewing our emotions as energy in motion. But if we keep pushing them down, they're going to come out sideways if we do that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's just practical steps are so accessible, right? It's just our awareness. Bringing your awareness to them is the first step. That's how we get to become more aware of our patterns, right? Mm-hmm. Is this a pattern that's benefiting me or not? Getting curious bringing that curiosity is something that's required for, like you did, coming to a breathwork session, and then also sticking with it, and maybe that's 3 minutes a day of breathing. That's often where I start with clients. Connecting to your body in just 3 minutes a day has been shown to be really powerful.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Thich Nhat Hanh or somebody is, right? Like you see the yogis meditate for hours, et cetera, et cetera. It was saying, look, one mindful breath a day is infinitely better than zero. So if all you had time for was just to pause and do one mindful breath, like how transformative, the from 0 to 1, the gain is way bigger than from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. Like that, the first one is just that first mindful breath, and you can take the space for that.
And it's that, just continually showing up and trusting that our bodies have an intelligence.
Yeah,
we really do. I mean, think about, like you mentioned, back on the savannas or back in the caves, how long would we have lasted if we didn't pay attention to our gut feelings?
Mm-hmm.
Not long, But part of my journey, it was like I was so disconnected from my gut feelings. And we've all been there, right? Think of a time when you had like an inkling, it can be so fast, but you didn't, your mind overrode it, only to regret it later, right? We've all been there. And so learning how to trust those sensations it's a process, right? It requires patience. We're conditioned to want the quick fix. It's never been a quick fix. There never will be one. Spoiler alert. But it's like, God, why would we not at least explore this? Our built-in ability to heal. Like our bodies are the most high-tech AI that ever has been and ever will be, I believe. What a gift. Let's explore that.
Well, and speaking of exploring, I mean, I think you were talking about there are a few different flavors. So you do in-person coaching and sessions, you have virtual, and then this course we'll certainly put it in the show notes. But if people want to learn more and follow up, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yes. So different options depending on where you're at. I do a monthly virtual breathwork session, which is great for people that want to feel the supportive energy of a group. Do that on Zoom. I do a little bit of space here and there, depending on the time of year for one-on-ones when people are ready to commit to that. And also have some retreats throughout the year. So I'm a big believer in, nature healing. Like we gotta reconnect, as the blue, the power of water and trees, So yeah, there'll be some resources in the show notes for how to connect and that workshop if people want to dive in with very practical takeaways, simple somatic tools that are really powerful and valuable. And then my website will be in there too for anybody who just wants to learn more.
Can you just give the URL just in case somebody is listening, but they're not clicking to the show notes? Yeah.
Yes. It's just Revive with Rach is my website. Yeah. So that was probably a lot, but I hope it made sense.
I think it's great because it gives people so many different avenues and entry points depending where they are, which is what you were saying. Like depending where you are, you need to meet them because your first step is not going to be the same as someone else's.
Yeah.
And I think these are all steps we need to take because this is part of the journey of our life, right? The unexamined life is not worth living. And we're at this time that it's so noisy all the time, listening to podcasts all the time, or music or noise in the cities, everything, that we don't create that space for the examination. And I'm just so grateful for the work you're doing and have done with me to help with that examination. And I'm just excited to share that with our listeners. So thank you for the work and the time today.
You are welcome. My pleasure. And beautifully put. Now's the time, man. What a gift to be alive, and it's time to look in the mirror. Even when it's scary, we can do it. Right? Especially when it's scary. So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us, and enjoy a lively day.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast.
And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.